There we go. I can talk a little bit softer. Yeah, looking forward to the day that we've got coming up. The morning will follow the pattern of yesterday, where we'll start with two of our presentations to really feed our thinking and, both that sensing and making sense of the world around us and the possibilities that exist in terms of innovation and disruption. Followed by the third one of our workshops, which will really shift its focus to, take a look at innovation and entrepreneurship. Really seeing how do you begin to think about the practical commercialization of all these great ideas that are possible when engineers turn their attention to not just solving a problem, but thinking about innovative possibilities. So that workshop will wrap up the morning. As we move into lunch, we're going to take advantage of a semi-working lunch. We'll give you about a half-hour lunch break, and then we'll have you reconvene in your small groups, and we're going to have you begin to think together about what were the most important sort of ideas, insights, ahas that came up over the last day and a half, and begin to synthesize that so that by the first part of the afternoon, as we move back into whole group, we can begin to put together that list. That in turn will feed the panel discussion that we're setting up. We'll move at that point, or at 3 o'clock, we'll reconvene in the auditorium down on the first floor, and you'll get instructions how to do that. And we'll have a panel discussion that will be live cast. And then we'll move from there back here just for a short closing set of comments, observations, and expressed appreciations in terms of what we'll be doing. All right? So one note that did come up, I forgot to remind people, on the back of your name tags, actually there's secret information. And being of an age where I don't appreciate what URLs do and that sort of stuff, actually not only the digital program, but the other thing that's, if you go to that site with the URL, there are bios of everybody in the room and pictures. And I should have reminded you yesterday morning about that, but if you want to actually figure out who Tim is, et cetera, that's one way of doing it. Now, hopefully you are as well typically now getting in the pattern of introducing yourself at the start of your workshops, but this will be a handy ad. Yes?
Will that stay live, that link, after the...
Yes. And we will be adding more material to it, featured recordings from the days and many other things.
So it'll become a resource for you, of the great thinking that's gone on here. With that, I will turn it over to Jerry.
Okay, we're going to jump right into our topic for today. For years, engineers and architects, I'm going to say it very bluntly, have been stuck. Their services have become commodities. Firms find themselves trapped in reactive, risk-averse roles, not included in decision-making, and now being threatened by new types of competitors. At the same time, AI, robotics, quantum computing, and synthetic biology are now emerging at scale, and they will affect physical infrastructure. But this provides us with the chance to turn confusing challenges confronting clients and communities into opportunities for technical innovation, entrepreneurial initiative, and ultimately the transformation of our profession. We have opportunities like never before. Matt Garver, who I can only describe as an AI and finance heretic. Sorry, Matt, I'm going to get you before you stand up here. We'll talk this morning about a class of entrepreneurial activities and opportunities that are at our doorstep as civil engineers, which he describes as physical AI. And he will also talk about how to engage capital market funding, whether it's equity investors, venture capitalists, private family funds, or sovereign wealth funds. Matt is the CEO of HighCo Solutions, a global provider of artificial intelligence, machine learning, edge AI, embedded systems, and neural networks. Matt is also the president and CEO of Liberty Street Capital, based in New York City and London, specializing in growth equity investments. He recently co-founded the Ares Institute, a New York-based finance conduit for digital infrastructure investments. Matt and I have worked together among all our speakers the longest time, 25 years, Matt. I added it up. We started in high school. He is also a friend who's been available to me at the most ungodly times and random places around the world. Who else could I call sitting in London, depressed that I wasn't with my family for my 50th birthday, only to discover Matt was also in London. And we had a revelrous time into the wee hours of the morning, as they say in Britain. Matt, it's a pleasure. Come on up.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? Yep. I have a whole slew of Jerry Buckwalter stories that will take place at the working session afterwards, but we'll change the name to protect the guilty in this case. So going to give a talk here this morning. I want to do a couple of things. I'm going to land on physical AI and the way I see the world emerging very quickly. I'm going to reach into the audience here on things that were touched yesterday. I'm also going to ask you to be skeptical. I'm going to ask you, if you have a question, let's ask it in real time. We'll have plenty of time. This is going to be an interactive discussion. It's too early in the morning to not be. If I see you falling asleep, where's Kyle? Kyle's coming to get you. There he is. And I'm going to tell this story. I'm going to walk through artificial intelligence, where it's going quickly, but I'm not going to talk about technical issues. We could if we want to. We'll talk about a couple. But I'm going to frame it in economics and why this is a profound general purpose technology that is transformative. We all kind of know that. I'm just going to tell it in a different way. And hopefully it's very obvious. And things that we thought were dystopian are in fact the greatest opportunities of my lifetime, which I'm on my 9th life at least. You're on 7, 8, maybe a little bit. So maybe there's extra innings for me, essentially, on that. And let me just start really quickly. I'm going to pose the question here, what happens when intelligence, savant intelligence, and the cost goes to zero? What happens in society? There is unlimited dystopian views on that question and on that answer. And some of them are real, and concern and criticism ought to be addressed to some of those. But there are an unleashing of new industries, new opportunities, and one of them lands squarely in this community's lap. And the question here is, are we ready for that? That's where I'm going on this, so engage if you can. I just put this up here not to impress, but to impress upon you a simple fact. I've actually had a seat in all of this discussion. So I've been an economist for ASCII. I've been an economist in the defense and aerospace sector. Worked at DARPA building a world model around economic statescraft. Boy, that was challenging, still challenging. It's going to take a while. A whole list of things. And the impression I want to leave on you is I've been an investor, I've been an entrepreneur, I've been a CEO running a global AI company. I've had all the different roles, so the position is very unique. Not just an investor, not a CEO, not a technologist. Done a little bit of all of it, so that's where the 9 lives comes from. And a lot of it came from early work with Northrop Grumman, which was one of the funnest things that we did, where we looked at all the technological capabilities transitioning out of the classified world into the commercial space. And I was on the team with Jer a long time ago, let's just say that, of what that looked like. So that's where we're going to go on this discussion. Let's start with this really simple fact, is the price of intelligence is collapsing at scale. And I'm going to posit a question and a framing exercise. If you operate in a recursive, self-improving environment, in a scale-free network, you can iterate infinitely. That's where we are, And that's why this has exploded in 18 months, and now we're finding the constraints of that capability. The one thing I'll point out here is the AI industry, every industry is looking for a way to think about something like Moore's Law, right? Transistor density, 18 months curve on Moore's Law. In this case, the capabilities to cost curve on artificial intelligence is doubling every 4 to 6 months. Just think about that. That's the recursive self-improvement in a scale-free network. We have come through this system so fast, it's shocking to all of us. That's why the cost on the fastest is dropping at 900x in the last 15 months. Just think about that, 900x on the fastest. So the marginal cost goes to 0. What does that mean? In a traditional world, you find your constraints. The price goes up on a marginal basis. This recursive scale-free network model takes it all the way down to 0. So I run a global AI software company. Recently just stepped down for new opportunities. Still a large owner of the company. In this case, digital services, digital goods, we're looking at token costs. And we're complaining about token costs. But it started at millions and now is actually 0. How many here operate, maybe when you go home, using Claude and just ripping through 10,000 lines of Python code? How many are doing that? I know, yeah, that's exactly. Whether you're doing it at work or not is a separate issue. You go home and then work on your passion projects. I have just done the exact same effort. And so all of a sudden, everybody is a savant Python programmer. How did that happen? Anybody who was a programmer before that? There's one. Now the answer is we're all that, and we have savant capabilities in that direction. Supporting evidence. I could go chart by chart by chart for hours and hours, but this is extraordinary what we're seeing. This is the greatest collapse of cost in economic history. Yes, sir.
Cost to the consumer. What about the back-end cost to build all that?
Great question. Hold that thought, because each audience has a different marginal cost. For us, the ability for savant capabilities is 0. For them, it's trillions. And it's an arms race, whether it works or not, is a separate question. We could disentangle every little element of the ecosystem. To us and the users, it's awesome. To them, we still got a long ways to go. And we don't know what this is going to look like on the other side of that. I give a long presentation on economics, and one of the slides is by Ken Rogoff, who was a mentor to me. This time is different. And it's 800 years of economic folly. And what are all the cycles that we've looked at over 800 years? That's a separate issue. I'll come back to that. The case I'm making is a structural transition. Pretty obvious at this point. But I'm telling it in a way that's really quite straightforward. So what is everybody getting wrong about this? And let me posit again, Jevons paradox. Jevons paradox, when something goes to the price of 0 or the marginal cost goes down dramatically, we don't use less of it. It doesn't wipe out every industry. We actually use dramatically more. When you look at this, that's obvious. You did that in high school. Price goes down, but we're seeing an explosion equal to what took place with the use of coal in Britain. That's the kind of structural transformation we're looking at here. Anybody have an issue with that? We went from one programmer, yes?
I have an issue with it primarily because AI's productivity is currently being compared to human productivity, and we will never compete. And so at what point do we start thinking about burnout, fatigue, et cetera?
Yep, great question. Hold that. Did you guys hear that? Yeah, we don't have the benchmarks how to think about it. So we're comparing to ourselves, and it's not exactly apples to orange comparison. I agree completely. So this is pretty obvious. I'm going to move really quickly through these. So what happens when intelligence is ubiquitous and the marginal cost is 0? The moat, the defensible, the barriers to entry to get into anything It actually moves through this recursive, self-improving, scale-free network. It's a lot of words at 8:30 this morning. We've come all the way through it. And where's the constraint? The constraint lands at the physical AI. Now, if you go to San Francisco and you're going to be swamped by robots, I was at Stanford Research Institute last week, and we had hundreds of companies with robotics. Robotics is a part of this, but it is not the whole story. The whole story is the physical world. Infrastructure of all kinds, energy infrastructure, the grid that we have that is so antiquated, we don't even know what to do with it at this point. So that's where we're going with this. So why is all the venture capital money flooding into physical AI? They lost their business models. They lost their moat to be competitive. Some of the best in left. You have no defensive posture. So it is all gone to physical AI. Yesterday, she touched my whole point, which was who's working with the leading academics and the flood that's coming into this space. And you're exactly correct. These world models are the emergence of that. So in a world where the cost has gone to zero, moats have gone to zero, quote me on that, moats are gone to zero. Where do you find a defensive position to be an investor, to be an operator, to have a technology transfer? And there's still some, and now we're going to transition into the economic part of this. Network effects, switching costs, economies of scale. It's not software. It's not intelligence. It's not a SaaS product. We've seen what's happened there. That is being agentified in real time. Industry has been repriced. These are the areas that are defensive. These are great areas. This is where you guys, this is your domain. So we have run out of data, but we haven't. We have not, because it's locked in the systems. It's in everything we talked about this morning. It's in the how to integrate physics and chemistry and all of those elements that are equation-based and physics-based. How do we embed that into our neural networks to get the best results of that? So yesterday we were on the moon. Today I'm taking us to the simplest example. And this is actually a bad example. Yours is much better, actually. I might call on you, so just buckle up. But what I wanted to see, I knew that these guys were going to take us to the lunarscape yesterday, and that's extraordinary. It's an incredible innovation. But just take a simple spring. If you just brute forced it with a neural network, you never get the right answer. If you embed the laws of physics, if you embed the laws of chemistry, whatever the quantitative nature of that is, you actually start getting a predictive answer. That is a lot closer, that's a lot better. And I won't go into the discussion of deterministic versus stochastic, but it actually gives you a deterministic output, which is something you can rely on. We're not there yet, but it is coming really soon. If that capabilities to cost curve continues at this rate, even accelerating, this is in every device, every spring, it's in everything that we're going to touch in the physical world. So what does that do for engineers? So here we are, disruptive innovation. Does that change the nature of being an engineer, a civil engineer? Let's just stay there. Does that change the nature of that? My position, it fundamentally should alter it, whether the community wakes up to this or not, or how to get in front of this, how to work with their clients. Who works with governments? Is there any government that's
something very simply, that we can potentially discover new physics. So that's an avenue we should also explore. I'll stop here. The last thought is, we've been doing PE certification to say like our building's safe or structures is safe. And I think with physical AI, we need to certify that the AI model we are using to predict something is actually safe. That brings AI back to civil engineering.
That's exactly. Auditability, governance, explainability, so it's not a black box hallucinating.
Thank you. I just want to add to that fantastic presentation. I feel like a soul sister. I really appreciate the invitation to come just to hear your presentation, but I feel like you left out one thing.
Yep.
I think if civil engineers can get this right, I'm so glad you showed this slide, we can get attribution for our knowledge.
That's exactly right.
And we can get compensated for that.
Yep.
With digital footprints that are blockchained throughout the entire process,
Yep.
and that's how we can monetize
Yep.
our knowledge.
Yep.
Great opportunity.
Yeah, I think that is, I think it's a historic turning point. And, you know, there's a lot of hyperbole. God, we pick up the news and people are going crazy in every direction. I actually believe it largely because the Jevons paradox, the collapse of the marginal cost, it's a fundamental transition. And we kind of all intuitively know it. There was a book by Alvin Toffler, 1970, Future Shock. If you guys all remember that one. He talked about the disease of modernity was the inability of individuals, communities, and institutions to change equal to the rate of change in society taking place. And if you couldn't, you start having mental issues, breakdown issues, all sorts of issues. That's more prescient today because the scale of these scale-free networks are taking us in a direction that is deeply uncomfortable. And that's going to make this community profoundly uncomfortable. To your point, engineers don't love a lot of this, but the auditability, the governance, the frameworks that actually are safe, they're emerging and they're here. And you guys are experimenting with this. It's really impressive. Yes, sir.
One up here. Her hand's gonna get tired if you don't get there. And then we'll go to the back.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm Brittany Kendrick. I, too, have lived several different lives as you guys, even at my little young age. I'm a startup founder. I work in the AE services now. Can you go back a couple of slides?
Yep.
It's really like 2 comments as questions, this particular slide.
Yep.
No.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yep.
So as a founder, a former founder, what I've come to learn, particularly as a Black woman, but then also I did not attend an Ivy League or Stanford, so being able to raise angel dollars of $1 million within the first year was not feasible for me, right? But what I was successful at doing is winning $500,000 worth of grants. And so what that afforded me is the ability to short circuit my company development to the point of scale without needing. And so now with like AI technology, the question is, do you think that the capital space is going to have to reevaluate this cash flow over time journey, that it will be short-circuited now that we have zero marginal costs for intelligence, but really when the rubber hits the road, people or engineers that are learning in schools, are they capable of building the implementation of these digital twins and these models to get to scale at a much faster pace because the intelligence, the digital twins have already gotten us there faster than we thought before.
They've come and gone, essentially. We're operating inside of this. Everybody hear that? It's a great question. There is a black art to raising money. I'm not going to steal Gabby's thunder, but she is going to talk about, I'm sorry, I'm not going to steal her thunder, but she is going through that right now. It is very difficult. SBIR grants, my goodness, that was the non-dilutive funding. If you had a bad idea and you wanted to test it out, but it actually had some potential value proposition. Great source, NSF grants, all these grants. You know, can we trust it? One constraint the US government, and I'm not going to go into my DARPA program, but we have $40 trillion. We have a constraint. Who is going to be buying these bonds at the end of the day if we're engaged with trade wars with everybody on planet Earth? We have found a constraint in the bond market. And what that puts pressure on all of us to do is our government might not be there for the things that we used to count on. We're going from 40 to 60, pick a number. That's terrifying for a world and a reserve system based on dollars. But that's where we are. So we're going to look to new ways of funding these kind of innovations. In fact, if the money's not there, their governments are terrible customers and difficult customers. They're great in some areas. And they've got a big change agenda, regulatory change for them as well. She's going to talk more about the venture. It's hard. Bob, you said it last night. You don't have to do everything. You have to have a team. You have to build teams around this. Somebody has a career in civil engineering and artificial intelligence, and then the funding is actually a capability you got to bring into that capability. Yep.
Yeah. Prito, a couple questions, a couple comments, if I can. So first, couple thoughts. As an engineer, bias in the underlying data and the inherent uncertainty in the underlying data is a concern.
Yep.
Even with bringing the physics in,
Yep.
that uncertainty in the data model still says we may not be getting what we should be getting
Right.
as a solution. That's first comment. Second comment is we see, and we see it outside of our civil engineering domain, we see that Newtonian physics doesn't quite cut it.
Yep.
That's what's driven the quantum revolution,
Yep.
is a different set of physics, if you will.
Yep.
We see that same systemic underestimation of fat tail behaviors
Yep.
in the collapse of civil infrastructure around us. So somebody earlier made the comment about, do we have the right physics? And I would challenge that if we're starting to use this at scale in engineering for the delivery of the built environment, we may not have the right physics. Third point, and I've dealt with a bunch of VCs at different stages and inventors at different stages. There's a heavy focus on what I would describe as widgets, single purpose, very narrow solutions. But the value is in the system solution. And there does not seem to be attention or money, at least that I've seen, go in that. And then one last comment while I've got the mic. I think there's a difference between intelligence, and I won't debate that intelligence costs going to zero. The question is, what's happening to wisdom? Is wisdom increasing in value? Is its marginal cost going to zero, or is it actually going up?
5 brilliant points. Let me see if I can get all of them right. Let me start with the physics. Totally agree. If anybody can explain the collapse of the wave function, we talked about that this morning. If anybody can, I went back and relearned physics to understand the entire ecosystem of quantum computing. I came out with a very positive view, but we don't have the understanding of the physics of where we're going on a lot of these issues. So entanglement, quantum tunneling, all of these issues, there's not a good explanation. There's about a half a dozen, and they don't get close in my view. So fundamentally agree with that. The venture side of it, give me a couple more, touch on quick, because you were great points.
Seeing the data.
Yeah, totally legit issue. I would invert that and say that's a huge opportunity. Somebody in this room is looking to put guardrails, guarantees, assurance. It's no longer the development, it's the output, right? So we're systems oriented, particularly in the engineering community, but now we need to be output oriented. And somebody who can assure quality and guarantees and outputs that are producing mission critical applications, fundamentally agree with that. I think that's a huge opportunity because there's gonna be a gap when you're merging deterministic and stochastic outputs and then applying them into some physical device or some operations. The systems approach, fundamentally agree. I'll give a really hard example. We were building a graphical neural network on this DARPA program that used complex systems, adaptive systems into the economics, not economic rules. We threw out the academics and we said, this is a complex adaptive system. I do X, you do Y. How do you design that? That's what we were working on. There are only heuristics in that direction. There's not a real set of how does a phenomenon, emergent phenomenon, or cascading or feedback loops, or your comment yesterday, self-organizing criticality when the sand pile collapses. We still can't explain that. We still can't explain. We're struggling on those issues. So you could model everything, but sand is the hardest thing to model. So agree fundamentally with those principles. I see those as opportunities. The engineering community needs to solve it practically, but it's also a huge opportunity because those gaps are going to be there for a while.
And with that, change the slide, which is your cue.
Yep. Yeah, time to go. This is the
hook.
The hook. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
And again, I know at 8:30 that was a fire hose, and I know there was a lot of language in there that engineers are not familiar with because we have lived in a world where we've been doing our traditional design activities. And if we want to move beyond it with this opportunity space that's emerging, we have to figure out how to finance it, build it, operate it, own our own facility and infrastructure projects, I would be bold enough to say. We must develop alliances with manufacturers to design new products and systems. We must create new forms of intellectual property by creating software, mining the data that's in the physical infrastructure and trapped there. Hence, it's the moat that makes our professional space unique. We must engage in performance contracting. Let's stop doing this billable hour stuff. You can tell I've been living with this challenge for a while. So we must establish companies and to design and build our own lines of infrastructure, if you will. That's where we create a new ecosystem. Or actually, in Kyle's words, if you've read his read ahead, revive an old ecosystem, where the symbiotic relationship between engineers, architects, and other disciplines can propel firms toward a more prosperous future than where some of you live right now. Magi, Richani, will talk about her journey as an entrepreneur who started with a focus on plant-based cheese as a key to more sustainable food production worldwide, but then grows a company that develops and commercializes hyperfunctional proteins, bioactive ingredients for food, nutrition, health applications, all by combining molecular farming with protein science, to oversimplify it. It's an example of another big, complex challenge, one ready for problem solving, learning, adapting, and building, something that engineers inherently know how to do. Magi is the founder and CEO of Alpine Bio, a San Francisco-based company that turns these plants into living bioreactors. In 2024, Magi was recognized by Inc. as one of the most influential female founders and was named to the top agri-food pioneers list by the World Food Prize. She is also an MIT 35 under 35 innovator. Magi, I haven't known you as long, so you're going to escape some of my sarcastic remarks. Although, if you behave, I won't tell Sam Altman what you said about him. And I won't tell you about what Sam Altman said about you. Magi, welcome. Come on up.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me. If not, I just use the microphone. Okay. Can you guys hear me? I have it. I have it. I just don't know where I should be clicking.
You've got to switch the slides.
Okay, great. I'm so excited to be here. Before I get started, and I just want to tell you why I'm here. It's not because Bob and Jerry paid me $1 million to leave my company in San Francisco for 2 days and spend it here. It's actually because I graduated from UT from civil engineering in 2011, and it was one of the most impactful experiences being part of this university and part of this program. And I feel like part of my goal in life is to give something back. And if I can inspire someone to do something, that would be a trip worth spent. So I'm very excited to be here. The first opportunity I got to engage back with the civil engineering community was last year. Dr. Howard Legistrian, who's sitting right here, invited me to speak at his class, actually. And one of the things, I'm going to tell you my journey in a bit, but I told the class, I think there was maybe 50 students in there, I can't remember. I told them about my journey, about what it's like to start a company, why I started it. And at the end of the class, I'm like, who here wants to start a company? Raise your hand. And literally nobody raised their hand. Nobody. Not one person raised their hand. And I was like, wow, did I really suck at giving a talk about how amazing it is to start a company? And then what was like really eye-opening is like a month ago, I gave the same talk at Stanford. And when I asked like, who wants to start a company, like literally 99% of the hands in the class raised. And I've met a lot of people from Stanford, I've met a lot of people from UT, and there's not really, like, they're not special, even though they think, I'm sorry if I'm offending anyone who went to Stanford, they might think they're special, they're not that special, and I think there's so much talent and potential at UT as well, so specifically within the civil engineering community. So I'm here to hopefully inspire people, and we're on the wrong slide, I'm sorry, okay. And I start by thinking about like why I started the journey and why I'm an entrepreneur. And maybe I like to go back, way, way back. This is me in Lebanon, where I grew up, which is a country in the Middle East that is always in the news for bad stuff, but it's actually like a great place if you remove the politics. And I grew up there, and that's where my family's from. And when I turned 18, I was raised by a single mom. My dad passed away when I was really young. When I was 18, my mom was like, you know what? You're not going to stay in Lebanon. It's not a stable place. You need to go. And she bought me a one-way ticket and shipped me to Texas. And that's how I landed here. Yeah, pretty much. And I did not, at the time, I didn't really know I was coming to Texas. I thought I was going to start university with everybody, all my friends, and I was so excited. And then I got really, really sad. 1 week before I was supposed to start the university in Lebanon, I got this one-way ticket. And I was like, okay, fine, I don't have a choice. I remember I cried so much at the airport in Lebanon that they upgraded me to business. Literally, which was great. When you're 18, you've never flown business, you're like, wow, this is amazing. But I cried the whole way. And I remember I had a stop in Paris on the way to Austin, actually. And I cried like for 4 hours nonstop. This is how hard it was. But in hindsight, it was honestly the best decision my mom has ever made to impact my life. When I got here and I didn't really have a plan, I started taking classes at a community college. And eventually, within 2 semesters, I applied to UT and got into the civil engineering program. And from there, my dad was a civil engineer. I honestly did not really know what civil engineers did when I applied. But I loved science, I loved math, and I applied and I got in. And I also didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in life. So then I did what a lot of people that are not 100% sure they know what they want to do. I applied to grad school, and I went and I got my master's at Berkeley, also in civil and environmental engineering. And then I went through like the traditional path of getting recruited by a giant oil and gas company, which you see their names on, you used to see their names on all the buildings. I don't know if their names are still on all the buildings. And that's kind of like what you're supposed to do, is go get this big job. And I got the job, and I realized after doing that job, I worked as a project engineer and a project manager at Shell for 3 years. I realized that I'm not passionate about oil and gas, sorry. I also did not feel like being in a big company is interesting. You learn a lot. I learned a lot about politics and bureaucracy, for example, but you don't necessarily get to do things. You don't get to build things quickly. You don't get to test things. You don't get to, innovate as much. I think someone yesterday, one of the speakers from NASA said like, oh, you need to give people permission to innovate if you are, in a corporate environment, which for me, yes, and it's kind of sad. And I think one way to not need to wait for permission is for you to just go and do something. So while I was working for Shell, I was looking for something that I was truly passionate about. And at the time, I realized that I was very lactose intolerant, and I didn't know why, because I love eating cheese. And I started looking into the science of it, and I realized, well, it's because my body doesn't produce lactate that digests the lactose, because I'm not a baby cow. And long story short is, it inspired me to look into the food system, and I realized like the amount of resources, land, water, CO2 that we emit from producing our favorite foods is just so insane. It's just like an immense footprint. And we've been relying on like this technology, which is an animal, which hasn't really evolved in thousands of years. We've always had these animals, as you can see from the picture, and we're fundamentally still using them. And I realized that we can innovate our way out of having to necessarily raise an animal for food and create proteins, which is the building block of a lot of the food that we eat. And we can make these proteins, but maybe in a different way that's more efficient. And one of the realizations I had is that, well, animals get most of their food from eating plants. So plants are really interesting bioreactors for protein production. But how can we make them produce maybe better proteins, more functional proteins? How can we figure out how to extract these proteins better? And that's when I decided, you know what, I'm gonna leave my job and I'm gonna just start a company. And at the time, Shell had moved me to the Bay Area. So I was based in Houston, but they moved me because they had an asset. That's their mistake. They moved me to the Bay Area, and then I was around all these people that are just creating and inventing and starting things. And there's something about being in an environment that is just so not afraid of failure and just trying, where it's actually like encouraged, and being around that environment makes you more open to like, yeah, I'm gonna try this, why not? The worst case, it doesn't work, right? Like the worst case, it doesn't work. The best case, you're 10 years in still building the company. But the worst case, it doesn't work, and then maybe you try something else. The corporate job is always gonna be there in the background, right? And I'm particularly talking to maybe the graduates in the room that are on each table as you think about the next steps. Like, I think we have this illusion that it's too risky to start a company. And my point of view on this is like almost too risky not to, because you are missing out on so many like innovative opportunities. You're missing out on learning, on pain, and the only way to learn and to grow is to go through the pain. Like if you want to avoid the pain, like you're not really growing. So I think it's just such an incredible opportunity. So I left my job at Shell, and of course, I didn't have a network. I don't come from that world. I don't know all these investors and VCs. I know Brittany made a comment earlier about like not having, yeah, I agree, but I think being in the right place at the right time helps a lot. And I was able to network and find one investor who like cared enough about the mission and being able to have like the impact that the technology could have if it worked, that he was like, you know what, okay, I think your idea is crazy and you're kind of a little crazy too, but I'm gonna give you $100,000. And I'm gonna give you $100,000, and not at pretty like bad terms, but I had nothing other than an idea. And he's like, if you can figure out how to get this going and hire like a small science team, de-risk the opportunity, file some IP, then I'll give you another $100,000. So I was like, okay, great, $100,000. What can I do with that? And of course, like at the time, I wasn't paying myself. I had very low personal burn. And I was like, I have nothing to lose. And this guy is giving me $100,000. Let me see what I can do with it. So I was able to recruit a scientist who had like the expertise in plant biology, because that's what we focus on. The nice thing about being in San Francisco is there are spaces where you can just rent a bench. You can literally, for $1,000 a month, rent like a bench space that comes ready to go, and then you can start doing experiments. So I was able to rent a bench, get a scientist to join me on the journey, and from there we started de-risking the science. And a few months into it, we were able to show proof of concept, file a patent, and the other investor that said, I'll give you another 100, they came through and he gave me another $100,000. And then from there, it was very gradual, but we were able to like de-risk the science and the technology. And one thing on fundraising, I don't know why it starts with fun. Like that should be removed from the word. There's absolutely nothing fun about fundraising. It's a very painful process. And I don't think everybody necessarily needs to raise money. Like a lot of businesses can be started without raising money. However, when it comes to like deep tech and science and engineering, you need like physical assets. You need scientists, labs, machines. Like you need to have lab. We have a pilot facility. Like you need all these things. And unless you're independently wealthy, you're not going to be able to do it without being able to get some capital. And I actually had the opposite experience where I went and tried to get some grants, and it was a horrible process. It was a horrible process. It's like the first grant I applied for said like, oh, this is too risky. The second grant I applied for said this is not risky enough. So I'm like, okay. And I remember meeting with an angel investor who now sits on my board. And he's like, don't waste your time because it's gonna come and you're gonna have so much paperwork to do that it's gonna take time away from building. Here, I'll give you $1 million, go build this, right? So that's a bit of the mindset of Silicon Valley that makes it, I think, like a unique place. It's very much like, we're gonna deploy capital and it might not work, but if it works, it's great. And I'm not gonna get stuck in like making you fill out 700 pages of what are you gonna do with the money? Just take it and figure it out, right? So I did that. And we were able to de-risk the science, and eventually, after 5 years of dedicated R&D, and we have a portfolio of about 50 patents on our technology. It's all developed in-house. I was able to finally like build the right team. We have 2 Stanford postdocs because we're in the Bay Area. We recruit a lot of people from local universities that are running our R&D program. And since then, we were able to produce a variety of proteins. We work with some of the largest companies, food and nutrition companies in the world. The ones that are public right now are like, for example, we have a collaboration with Mars, which is a snacking company. There's a bunch of other ones that I signed contracts that I cannot talk about it at the moment. But it's went from like an idea on paper to selling to some of the largest companies in the world. And the really exciting part about it is like seeing something that you build that was an idea on paper come to life. And I'm realizing I'm still on the first slide, but I don't have that many slides. So yeah, this is not very slide heavy. And the point I'm trying to make is that every single person in this room is actually a creator. I think we're not born to sit behind a desk and check boxes. I think every single person has the ability and like just the intrinsic, the natural ability to create and innovate. And I think we start off as kids that way, and somehow life happens and we become less and less and less of that. And what I hope to inspire everybody is to like find the creator in them and do something about it outside of a corporate job, maybe. So really there are so many problems in this world, and we can look at them as problems or we can look at them as opportunities. I naturally see something and I'm like, I want to fix it, right? Like, and I think having that mindset and that lens on the world is extremely valuable. And we can sit here and think about how like, yes, AI is coming, or we can say like, oh my God, this is amazing, then I can innovate with less tools and less capital, right? There's like 2 completely different perspectives around the same topic that we can have. There's gonna be like shortages of resources, energy, water, food, fuel, like there's so many issues, diseases, but there's also opportunities to solve these problems. And because the problems are becoming bigger, the opportunities are also becoming bigger, and we need more people to come to life and want to do something about it, right? So I get this question asked a lot, like, when should I start a company? How do I do it? Like, what do I need? Like, I don't have a fully fleshed out business plan. I'm like, who cares? Like, just go start somewhere. Just do something, right? Like, I think there's never a perfect time. You just have to go do it. You're never gonna have all the answers. Actually, if you have all the answers, it's a bit weird. Like, you're not innovating enough. Maybe you're never gonna have all the answers. And for the particularly like people that are just graduating or even like early in their careers, I think there's 3 big, huge advantages that I had that you have, which is 1, you don't have that much to lose. Like, your net value is gonna be maybe for me, I had like student loans, so it was negative. You don't have that much to lose. You also have a different perspective. Like, I think what's interesting for me, having a civil engineering background, going into biology, I was able to take like engineering frameworks and apply them to science, which tends to be a bit more irrational, not irrational, but we don't fully understand it, more uncertain. and apply an engineering mindset and framework to it. So being an outsider gave me a huge advantage because sometimes people that spend too much time in an industry don't see the solutions. And I know you're all experts in your field, and I'm not discrediting that, but sometimes because you're an expert in a field, you might not disrupt it the way someone who's looking at it with completely like new eyes and questioning everything might. And then obviously like the tools are so powerful. Like I know so many founders and companies, like even my own company, we need so many less people than we would have needed 5 years ago, just because of the tools that are out there that we can leverage. So yeah, it's never a better time to go and start something. And this is just the same message around like, I really don't believe humans were meant to sit behind a desk. Like I don't believe that. I think we're meant to go and create and innovate and try. The biggest comment that I get from friends that are considering it but don't do it is, what if I fail? Which is really interesting because, yeah, what if you fail? Like, so what? Like, I think failure should be celebrated more, encouraged more. It shouldn't be necessarily viewed as like a bad thing. And if when we look at it as a bad thing, it stops us from trying, right? And for me, it's like failure to try is a bigger failure than not trying and failing. If that makes any sense. So yeah, that's kind of like my last slide and my last giveaway. Like one of the things that I loved about being at UT is like the slogan of what starts here changes the world. And I really like feel like I've embodied that in terms of my actions and what I choose to do. And I really see so much potential for particularly the civil engineering department to be doing that. It's not going to be a natural thing necessarily, especially given that literally nobody raised their hand when I asked who wants to be an entrepreneur. So I think we have a lot of work to do to get there, to maybe get like 10% of the room to raise their hands. But I do think it's like a massive opportunity, and the time to do it is now. And there's no reason why UT and civil engineering could not be on the forefront of innovation. I mean, as Matt mentioned, like a lot of the challenges that we're going to face are going to be like integrating technology into the physical world. And the biggest challenges, whether it's water, energy, like health, it's all related to building things, moving molecules, not software, right? And it needs people that have deep technical knowledge and backgrounds. So I'm very hopeful that next time I come, maybe in 5 years, and I will ask who wants to be an entrepreneur, the majority of the room will raise their hands. Thank you.
We'll just take a few minutes for just a few questions, but then we'll start into the rest of the day. Right over here.
So my daughter lives in the Bay Area, and she dates. And I think anyone she dates is either in VC or a startup company. And so I wonder if this idea of going out on your own and starting a company, did you have that in Houston, or did it kind of grow once you moved to the Bay Area?
I think it's a combination of my growing up in Lebanon, honestly, with a very, like I'm the first person in my family to work in a corporation. Like my parents are both, my dad was a civil engineer and he had his own construction company, and my mom was a housewife, and when my dad passed away, she couldn't be a housewife and she became an entrepreneur. So I think that it was always in me, but also being in the Bay Area, the environment is just so conducive to like, it's just very enabling, you know? So yeah, a combination.
Yeah, front here. Got two right.
Hi, thanks. Is this on? I would not have raised my hand in that room because I'd have been scared to start a company. In fact, I was halfway through my career before I had the courage to do it. I just realized something today during your talk. I tried 3 times. The first 2 failed, and the third one was very successful. And I'm pretty sure it's because the first 2 times I just, at that point, wanted to have a company doing what everybody else did. And then the third time I had a better idea to do it different. I think the key is the idea. Anyway, great talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Maggie, thank you very much for sharing your story. I'm 100% with you. I think civil engineering has a lot of opportunity. But what I observed as a professor is, we see a lot of opportunities, but taken by people not from civil engineering field, like Amazon, right? Like Uber, they're doing transportation work, but they're not from, the student we raised or we trained. So in your opinion, like what is the biggest barrier for civil engineering students to be opening up their mind and try to take some actions like what you did? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's cultural, honestly. I think it's like the DNA that needs to change a little bit. Like, for example, when I was doing my civil engineering degree, I also took classes in the business school. I remember I did like that. And when I went to Berkeley and did my master's, I also did a minor in business because I was always interested in the other side. And I know like saying business to an engineer is like, ugh. But I think like having a bit more of a rounded experience outside of like the technical, because you can have all the technical that you like, but you need to also be able to like be a bit more like entrepreneurial and say like, okay, I want to put a team together and I want to build something. Because if you don't do that, then someone's going to do it and hire you as the civil engineer to just go build it for them, and they're going to get more of the upside, right? So I think it's a bit of like a cultural shift that needs to happen, and I think it can happen by having a bit like more rounded outside of the discipline education, and like exposing people to more of these opportunities, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Of
I
course.
just want to wrap up with a comment. I see actually a lot of students with great potential. Actually, my lab just have a spin-off company. They've been very successful. They were like accomplished like a 12-fold growth last year. But I just see like how could we make this, a common thing our student would think, right? So I think Jerry is great to put this topic in this discussion. I think we can all learn something common and maybe revise our curriculum so we can see more technologies raised from our field, particularly for today when we see AI need a domain support. And if we don't have that domain support or like we're passively supporting, we will not accomplish as much as we could. Thank you.
Yeah, also like one quick comment is like when I was, and that was like over 15 years ago, but when I was a student, like the goal was to go get a job at like Exxon, Chevron, Shell, blah, 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 that was the goal. And it was so embedded in like the system. And I think that needs to change. Sorry for anyone working at these companies.
Last question right here.
Yeah, and this is a question that is kind of a spin-off. So I always thought that perhaps the barrier that we had in civil engineering to people that were not, we were producing products, as I'm an engineering educator for 30 years. We're producing products that aren't entrepreneurial. So for a long time I thought we're just appealing to the type of person that doesn't have that in their DNA, as you had mentioned, in your DNA. And more recently I'm seeing that the educators are the problem. So how can we educators change what we are doing with our students to promote and to inspire and to light that little flame that starts, that maybe they just do a little bit of entrepreneurial work in their hobby and they're a corporate cog wheeling it, or maybe they become the next Magi. So how should we move forward?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of opportunities. Like of course, like the exposing them to other entrepreneurs is helpful for sure. But I also think like building it into the curriculum better. Like I don't know, like entrepreneurship for civil engineers as a class, and like going through like here are all the incredible companies that got started that have civil as a foundation. Like I know of a company, for example, doing cement-free cement that's lower carbon, that's not started by a civil engineer, right? Like, it's just like, I can name so many examples of incredible civil engineering technologies that should have been started by a civil engineer but have not. Like, maybe have a class on that. So people like can open their eyes and have a different view of things, yeah. And then, of course, like, I understand, like, the system is built in a specific way that, like, the sponsors are gonna be sponsoring because they want to recruit from these, you know, to get people for these corporate jobs, but maybe we can get different types of sponsors. I don't know, like, I think there is a lot to be done around the environment and integrating more classes and opportunities, or maybe like having projects. Like, when I was at Berkeley, I was in a class that was like, you had to build something, and you had to come from different disciplines, build something, and like pitch it. And you could, if you want, start a company from it. And some people end up starting companies from there. Like, I think there's a lot of different, I'm sure Jerry has a million examples for you guys, but there's different ways to like make it part of the DNA over time.
Maggie, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Kyle very shortly, but I want to make an admission here. We flooded you this morning with the entrepreneurial, finance, business, economic side of things, and we did it deliberately. As we developed the topics for this, early conversations, Bob, that you started with Don and Kyle and Manish and I, we were absolutely convinced, I've been convinced for a long time, that the entrepreneurial muscles that were fully developed in the 1960s, 70s, early 80s for civil engineers have atrophied over time. And so we deliberately designed this morning to start to address that. But I want to put that in perspective. I'm going to give you a little bit of the anti-Maggie conversation. We will design the exercises that are to follow to take an entrepreneurial kind of ecosystem next step look. And we're doing that very deliberately because our entrepreneurial muscles have atrophied. However, keep in mind, if you're not wired to start a new company, this morning's exercise is just as relevant for you. I lived in a giant company. Not all giant companies allow you to be innovative. That's worrisome. And you need to be careful about that. But there are giant companies that will give you permission to be innovative, or even a small lab down at Kennedy Space Center, Rob. So look for those if you're not wired, and the principles that you'll be working on the rest of the morning will apply because they're the same principles I did with the entrepreneurial, innovative play money that I was given at Northrop Grumman to do the very same things even within a corporation. So if you're wired for the corporate world, this exercise is just as much for you. I just want to make sure that's clear, because that requires the same innovative entrepreneurial muscles even if you're in that environment. And if you're not in that environment in the corporate world, you need to think about what your next gig is, because otherwise those muscles won't rebuild. So I want to make sure everybody understands this is for you no matter whether you sit in the corporate world or you're ready to explore the next new companies. Same principles apply. And Kyle, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I just to emphasize, my version of what Jerry just suggested, you can think about it that there are really three types of entrepreneurs that are out there. There are the classic entrepreneurs doing it on their own, building their own company. But there are also organizational entrepreneurs inside these companies. And in fact, the best of those organizations have programs to promote that type of innovation and entrepreneurship inside their organizations. But I want to add a third one, which I think is really significant in our world. There are social entrepreneurs that are doing it not to maximize profit or to build profit per se, but to do the good work that they can do with regard to the social causes and problems that they truly believe in. And each of those can leverage the same, if you will, mindsets, toolkits, perspective in terms of how you innovate, how you grow, how you scale, all of those types of things. But, you know, so you can do it inside, outside, for profit, not for profit. The same activities can make a difference in the world. All right, we're going to take a 15-minute break, come back, roughly 15 minutes, come back at 10 o'clock, right?
Can we make a quick announcement?
Yeah.
I think